The initial rollout of the COVID vaccines has not been smooth in a number of different states, sometimes through a complete lack of organization, terrible decisions in terms of the scheduling, and there are other motives that might bear into this. So let's talk about Dallas County. Dallas County Court apparently voted recently to rescind an order that would have prioritized doses of the vaccine for people living in the county's most vulnerable zip codes, but agreed to meet again later this week to design a vaccination plan that will be transparent and accountable. So here's what the original plan was. A divided Dallas County Commissioners Court had voted Tuesday to prioritize vaccines at its Fair Park Distribution Center for individuals in mostly Black and Latino neighborhoods, a reflection of increased vulnerability to the coronavirus in 11 Dallas County zip codes. In Dallas, as in other major Texas cities, distribution sites are more commonly located in white neighborhoods. And early data showed the North Texas County had distributed most of its shots to residents of whiter, wealthier neighborhoods. Now, when they wanted to fix that, Texas health officials pushed back on the proposal, warning that it was not acceptable to the Department of State Health Services. I would love to have heard like extended questioning about that and exactly why a more just, equitable distribution of the vaccines would have been a problem. But in any event, after that pushback, we now have this Dallas court decision. And so I am interested to see in the long run how this is adjudicated, both for Dallas County, but also across the country, where I've read instances of distribution centers being set up in areas that are lower income, but then the actual analysis of the dose distribution found that they were mostly going to people living in a neighboring wealthier county that were crossing over and soaking up those doses. And that, for habitual viewers of the show, is going to be the least surprising thing in the world, that the rich are going to be jumping the lines. But I'm curious for both of your thoughts.
David, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, a couple things. Number one, I think this is a distribution issue, but it's also a demand issue. So people of color are, and probably rightfully so, more skeptical of large-scale immunization programs because of a very rich history of using communities of color for experimentation, for lack of a better word. And I think that's a history that is only really going to be counteracted with an education campaign. And that has been extremely lacking, especially at the federal level, where there's been no messaging. It's just they've been dumping vaccines on the states and saying, hey, have at it. There's been no real messaging for why this is so important, the steps that were taken to ensure safety and things of that nature. So I think there's a demand issue. It's pretty interesting when you see Bloomberg has these great charts about where the vaccine is being distributed and who's doing a good job and who's not doing such a good job. And the worst states right now for vaccine distribution are California and a bunch of states in the Deep South. And you'd think that they have no connection to one another whatsoever in terms of tax policy, in terms of the type of government and things. But you have California, a state with a heavily diverse population, and you have the Deep South, which has pockets of heavy Black communities. And the states that are actually getting the vaccines out are states like small states like West Virginia and North and South Dakota, which are very homogenous in terms of their race. So I think there are some interesting things to draw from that. But I think early on in the vaccine process, we got very hung up on prioritization and trying to construct the most perfect, equitable kind of way in which to get these shots out. And we forgot about the fact that when you get a shot into somebody's arm, that helps everybody, because it means that less people are using the health system. It means that it's one step closer to herd immunity, and that protects all of us. So we just need to get these things out. At some level, we do need to make particular care on populations, particularly around the demand side, to make sure that Black communities, Latino communities actually want to get this virus. But we just need to actually get this thing out, because the faster that we do it and return to normalcy, the better off we'll be from a public health standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from every standpoint.
Really, really interesting insights on the demand side, David. My first thought is, look, inequities have existed in this country long before COVID. I think education, policing, we're all familiar with them. I think what we should be grateful for this thing in some ways, because I think what it's revealed is that maybe with the inequities around education or policing, we could write them off as the remnants of a past that was intentionally inequitable, and we were, trying to rebuild them to a more equitable state. And what we've seen is that we'll willingly rebuild inequitable systems like the COVID vaccination in this day and age. Between that and this resurgence of white supremacy, we're just seeing there's more cultural work to be done there, which I think is important. And I think the other thing that maybe hits home about this is there was a moment there during the beginning stages of the pandemic where we were all vulnerable in a way where we thought, or at least many of us thought, we might be reliant on systems. Many of us who aren't typically reliant on systems thought we may be reliant on systems, whether that's eviction moratoriums or welfare or whatnot. And so because of that shared vulnerability, these inequities seem more intolerable because we can empathize with them. We saw ourselves as someone who would also have to rely on those same systems, which I think at the end of the day, I don't know how long we carry that with us, but I think at the end of the day, it's making us more empathetic and more upset when we see our social systems fail to live up to what I think we'd like them to be.
Yeah. Look, as both of you pointed out, it is complicated. I can't help but think that over the past, month or 2 months or so that since the vaccines have been approved for distribution, or even hypothetically in the months leading up to it, the federal government caring at all to get involved might have helped in some way, but why would they have? That would have been so inconsistent with the overall federal response to the pandemic. And he's out, he's already paid the electoral price for not giving a damn about this, but it's just it's like add that to the pile of things that needlessly caused more loss of life. You never know when new administrations come in and then they say, here's what was left for us. You never know exactly how much of that you can trust, but when they say that there was no vaccine distribution plan, I kind of believe them. I think that there was probably nothing. I think like their fantasies for tax reform, I think it could have fit on a postcard, probably. And people will die as a result of it, potentially thousands or tens of thousands. I also wanted to just throw out there, there's going to be a lot of these sorts of anniversaries coming, but here's a fun one. It is the 1 year anniversary of Donald Trump telling CNBC, we have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China. We have it under control. It's going to be just fine. And that is because the first person crossed over into America from China that was infected with COVID, or at least the first person that we knew of at that point, since we weren't testing for it. Fact check shows that was not true. It was not going to be just fine. And
it wasn't just one.
More than 500,000 will die. No, it was.
Look, John, he didn't want to panic people. He didn't want to give people the wrong impression that this might be problematic.
What's so upsetting hearing that is that 10 months later, he got 74 million votes. You know what I'm saying? There is, to a degree, it's acceptable if you're watching Fox News all day and you're being told certain things and you get whipped up, that's fine. But this guy said things that kind of, were contradicted, the next week by himself. It's remembering those type of things, to be honest, that makes me realize what a hole we're in with a certain decent percentage of our base, and how someone who was so wrong still garnered that many votes from folks who followed him. There's just so much work to be done with that base. It's confusing how to cross that bridge with those folks.
Yeah. One thing I'm thinking about is we know that, and we knew this well before the Biden team had to tell us, that there was no distribution plan at the federal level. I mean, they told us very specifically, like, we give the vaccines to the states and they figure it out. Like we knew that, and that was certainly a problem, especially in the early going, when you were relying on these states that were already dealing with the pandemic and the health consequences of that to actually throw a mass immunization program that's one of the largest logistical processes in American history on top of that was too much for these states to ask.
Yeah.
The states are sort of figuring it out though. So, Biden has this benchmark of 100 million shots in the first 100 days. We are almost at that level right now. And we were since the beginning, like the end of the Trump presidency, we were at about 900,000 a day. You don't have to get that much more to get to 1 million shots a day and be on that level. The problem is that 100 million in 100 days isn't enough. I mean, if we want to actually get to something resembling normalcy by summer, we have to do much better than 100 million in 100 days. And the problem that we're running up against is the problem that the Trump administration had that they don't talk about, which is the problem of production. We don't know if there's going to be enough vaccine to get everybody who wants a shot to have one in a timely fashion. And the fact that we didn't spend every available dollar to pre-position all of these vaccines, to build the factories that we had to build, even if we built factories for vaccines that ended up not being approved by the FDA. So what if you wasted a little bit of money on that to be able to get all these things through? And then when you did approve one like Pfizer, Moderna, to reconvert all of the other facilities that are working on vaccines and say, nope, we got two, we'll pay you here. We'll just give you, here's the formula, just go make some for us. That is almost a bigger problem right now, because we're rapidly moving from a time when the problem was distribution to now the problem is supply.
David, John, not to hold us up too much on this point, but I just wonder, as these things are kind of become more and more apparent, the lack of Trump's willingness to ensure that we can get past this pandemic as quickly as possible. Do you think this will have, and I know this is so hard to predict, but any blowback from his base as like this becomes more apparent that we just didn't have the infrastructure in place to help? Is something as core as like literal health, or is it zero? Is there anything that impacts this?
Well, I mean, he lost the election, right?
Yeah,
and I think without a pandemic, he probably would not have lost the election.
I think that's right.
That's my counterfactual. And
I don't think it's likely to more now that they can say it's Biden's fault, but yeah, it did have some effect, sure.
Yeah, and they lost in Georgia, and the reason I think they lost in Georgia was more economic, and the issue of the $2,000 checks, but that also is a reaction to the pandemic as well that caused the blowback. So where Democrats were able to rather skillfully and unexpectedly go with populism in a way that managed to turn out voters. So I think it's a problem that 74 million people voted for Trump, but let's not forget that 81 million people voted for Joe Biden, who's not exactly a stirring political figure, but he was not Trump, and that's what ended up succeeding. So we got to keep focus on that too.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.